Justpearlythings is a well-known anti-feminist YouTuber. In 2023, I went on her large podcast twice. This video shall be showcasing my first appearance on Pearl's show, with short clips of me reacting to myself on her show. My name is Zarina Matcha, and you're watching The Rational Female. If you enjoy my content, give the video a like and subscribe to my channel. Now, onto Pearl's show.
Today's topic is feminism toxic? Do you think that feminism is toxic? Yes or no? And tell me why. Starting here and then go around.
Yes, feminism is absolutely toxic. It's completely terrible for society. It's destroying men. It's destroying women. I think it's probably one of the worst things to happen to male and female relationships. So yeah, absolutely agree.
I don't know. I think I'm 50-50. I think it's good for us females to, I don't want to say something and then people don't agree with me.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do think it's toxic?
Yeah, it is very toxic.
Okay.
100%.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think it's toxic. I think it breaks down the family unit, and I also think it impacts society in a negative way.
As a man identifying as a woman to compete in women's sports, I think it's great. It has really increased my athletic performance relative to my competition. And I'm looking forward to being called stunning and brave. Any ideology probably starts out at some point with some positive attributes that are necessary for society. Like every ideology eventually becomes weaponized, and I think right now we're living in a world where you ladies are acknowledging it as well, which is very strange for a woman to say that, like, oh, feminism's toxic. Because you're a woman, you should be like, yay, feminism, right? There's a certain ideological weaponization where feminism went from empowering women to just shitting on men.
Okay. So
Well, when do you think feminism was ever empowering for women?
My mom is a computer scientist, as an example, right? Like, she's very intelligent. She went all the way through the school, got her master's and PhD, whatever she got. And so she performed, she just retired like this month, but she performed at a very high level, at a very male-dominated industry. And frankly, she's not a very feminine woman. So like the opportunity for her to go all the way in her education, which was in math and computer science, and then implement that for her career, was very beneficial for her. Like, she would not fit the mold of a woman that is in a, let's say, more controlled society where that might have not been an option, right?
Rosalind Franklin was a British chemist and X-ray crystallographer. She has been dubbed the Sylvia Plath of molecular biology. She did not associate herself with the feminist movement, nor label herself as a feminist. She never complained about sexism, and instead just saw herself as a woman doing her work. Grace Hopper was a pioneering computer scientist who also never identified as a feminist. These were talented, outlier women who were dedicated to their work but felt no need to identify with the feminist movement. There are actually many women who have been like this, who were successful, driven, and talented, but never aligned themselves with feminism.
Then what does that have to do with feminism? What does her success have to do with feminism?
Well, I understand what you're saying. So when you go back to, like, for example, one of the stand countries right now, where maybe 15, 20 years ago, women were not allowed to get an education above, let's say, the 4th or 5th grade level. And you might say, fine, but I would say, okay, at that point, you need it to push it a little bit further, right? Like, if you have to tell girls, you're a writer, right? We had a conversation before we started. You're smart. Like, you know things. You quoted Aldous Huxley. I'm like, she reads.
Yeah, but what's that got to do with feminism? Wouldn't you put that down to somebody's individual merits and their personal ability?
Well, the original premise behind feminism, we're going back a couple hundred years here, was that women were allowed to substantially be educated as much as men, because certain religions, let's say, forbade women from getting a higher level education. Like, they were not even allowed to read.
That is an argument against religion. Islamic theocracies definitely are oppressive towards women, and I would argue they're also oppressive towards men. And this is what many Iranians, especially Iranian women, have been fighting against. However, religion brings its own problems, as under a theocracy, everyone has to follow God's rules and abide by certain rules. It's restrictive for a reason, to keep society stable. This is not an argument in favor of feminism, it's an argument against religion.
There was a time where, and that was a while ago, there was a time where you would not have been able to have been an author. And you think of
what time period was that? Because as far as I know, in the US, like 17, I know at least 1800s, like, women were published.
If you look up British female authors from the 16th and 17th centuries, there are quite a few listed on Wikipedia. The issue here is not that women couldn't do certain things, it's that women generally had other priorities because of the way society was set up. But women who wanted to be authors evidently could be. Jane Austen is one of the most famous authors of the 18th century. We should also remember that becoming a creative is difficult for most people. Many authors historically were penniless and struggled to get published. Charles Bukowski didn't get his debut novel published until he was 50. I absolutely love Post Office. It is literally hilarious. You should definitely read it if you haven't read Bukowski. I also have Women up there somewhere. Yeah. Generally, men were more respected and women were more loved. Men and women were expected to shoulder different roles in society. From a modern lens, this isn't necessarily what we would agree with, but there were reasons for this. Again, religion did play a huge role in the past in maintaining structures of society. It's rather false to insist that women had no rights and could do nothing.
Feminism, like at its core, it didn't start out with nefarious intent.
Completely disagree. If you go back to, so for example, the 1848 Seneca Falls Convention, you'll find that actually right from the get-go, feminism was always very, very misandric. It's a big misconception because a lot of people think feminism was once good, but actually this is a lie. And if you look at historically, feminism
I agree with you that
from day one has always been.
I agree with you that ideologically it was misandric. It was a Karl Marx kind of a situation.
Yes,
I know,
absolutely,
100% it started that. No, 100%. Would you be okay if women were not allowed to go past the third grade education in the society in which you live?
The misconception here is that the main inequalities in society were actually more to do with class rather than gender. Because, for example, a wealthy woman would have had much more social privilege than a poor man.
Margaret Brent became one of the largest landowners in colonial Maryland in the 17th century. Certain aristocratic families allowed women to inherit property in the absence of male heirs. I found a recent study actually saying that land and wealth was passed on to women in Celtic Britain.
And women actually could be educated. For example, during medieval England, a lot of women worked in nursing, they worked in teaching. So this idea that somehow women couldn't be educated. I mean, if you just look at the West, for example, this isn't true. Actually, education was more reserved for the upper classes, and it's always been that way. Even things like property ownership as well. It's not really, the feminists has made it as a men versus women thing, but it was never the case. It was more about class. So if we just look at, say, the West or England, education opportunities have always been there, but they've been reserved for the wealthier classes. And the feminist lie effectively is that, oh, this was about men oppressing women, but it wasn't. It was more about the upper classes were the ones who held more of the privilege in society. You know, and women, you know, they did things like sewing, needlework, music, things like nursing. A lot of women worked as governesses. So it is a big misconception that women couldn't work or that women couldn't have careers or that women weren't educated. A lot of these are very big misconceptions.
But most women live their lives according to feminism because traditional women put family first.
But you don't have to be
traditional women are typically married before the age of 25 because that's the number one thing they prioritize.
Leah Heilpern is a crypto investor who has countless videos on her channel all about Bitcoin. She is definitely not a feminist and has spoken out in support of red pill ideas. She also has a full interview on her channel with Andrew Tate. Not all career-focused women are feminists. Ayn Rand, Bridget Bardot, Joan Didion, and Grace Hopper and Rosalind Franklin, both who I mentioned earlier, were all career-focused women who were not feminists.
That's the life of a feminist.
Prioritizing a career isn't feminist. For example, Margaret Thatcher. No, it's not. Margaret Thatcher was not a feminist. Like the options don't have to be traditional woman versus feminist. This is a misconception. Plenty of women have careers are not feminists.
So women that are truly I'm not even saying I'm not a traditional woman. Otherwise, I'd be married by now.
Okay, so by that logic, Pearl is a feminist. She has just called herself a feminist because in her eyes, the only two options are traditional woman and feminist woman. Since she admits to not being a traditional woman, she is a feminist. Do we see how ridiculously stupid this logic is if we're now saying that Pearl is a feminist? I too am a feminist. Candace Owens is a feminist.
She was a
Thatcher
eugenicist.
was kind of feminist.
No, she wasn't. She was a very anti-feminist, very vehemently anti-feminist. Because the thing is, I think people confuse feminism.
If she was in office, she's got to be a feminist.
No, you
She was
guys,
so feminist.
there's a big confusion between feminism and careerism because a woman can be very, very career-focused without being feminist.
Margaret Thatcher is literally famous for hating feminism and for saying, I owe nothing to women's lib. Pearl has no idea what she is talking about. Most feminists don't even like Margaret Thatcher. She was ardently anti-feminist. How stupid.
Feminism is specifically about liberating women from the patriarchy. That's what feminist theory comes from.
But part of feminism is spending your primary reproductive years on a career and not a family.
Not necessarily.
A big part of feminism is breaking up the family, pushing policies that break up the family.
I have never heard anyone define feminism as spending your most fertile years prioritizing career over family, which, by the way, again, would make Pearl a feminist because she has basically prioritized her career over having a family during her most fertile years. So that's a bit stupid. Prioritizing career over family is a personal choice. It's an individualistic choice. That would be individualistic feminism, which many actual feminists reject because they value collective action and legal reform over personal responsibility and personal decisions. A woman choosing to prioritize a career over family is a personal decision. Women have always been able to do this, like Jane Austen. The trouble is when we push onto society that all women should focus on a career, when the majority of women would prefer to focus on family, which I do agree with. Really, we shouldn't have feminism. We should just have people making their own decisions. Most women want a husband and a family, and a minority of women would probably like to become an author, a physicist, an engineer, etc., and they have every right to. Pearl doesn't even acknowledge one of the most famous anti-feminist women, Phyllis Schlafly, who worked during World War II as a gunner and technician, earned a law degree, and ran for Congress as a Republican. She was also married with 6 children, but she was definitely not a traditional woman by Pearl or anybody's standards. Suzanne Venker, Phyllis Schlafly's niece, is very similar. She is an accomplished author, radio host, and marriage coach. She went to university. She would probably not class herself as a traditional woman. Her mother also worked, from my understanding. I'm pretty sure she mentions it in one of her books.
It's more about this idea of women are an oppressed social class by a patriarchal society, because the confusion comes when we start saying that a woman having a career means she's a feminist, because feminists will use that as an argument. Feminists will use that as an argument, and they'll say that in order to be a strong, independent woman...
It's using your primary reproductive years for a career instead of a family.
Which is exactly what Pearl is doing. Therefore, Pearl is a feminist.
I'd say it more pushes women against men.
I mean, it does that too.
Yeah, that's what I feel it's doing, and that's,
definitely.
that's...
I think a big problem as well with feminism is a lot of women have become very anti-men, and a lot of women are not appreciating the things that men do in society. Mm-hmm. This is a big problem. A lot of, men are doing most of the dangerous jobs. They're really not being treated and being respected. Would you say that in the past, because, for example, prostitution was very common in the past, and it was quite common for a lot of men to have, say, a wife, but then also go to a prostitute. Why would a man who is in a sexually satisfying marriage feel the need to go to a prostitute? Do you think there could be perhaps a correlation between, say, the obsession with female purity and, we'll say, I don't know, men almost seeing women, dividing women into two categories, the wives and the whores, and how this could actually be quite harmful because it almost divides women into chattel. You end up with the man having his wife who is the good girl and the prostitute who's the bad girl, as opposed to having both of the women in one woman. Yeah,
so it's really interesting. Like, Australia introduced pro-prostitution laws, 30 years ago, something like that, and one of the most ridiculous outcomes of legalizing prostitution in Australia is that the divorce rate significantly fell. It fell to 8% or something. It was crazy, right?
So a big reason why men went to prostitutes in the past was because they were not sexually satisfied, and that's one of the reasons why prostitution historically served a function in society. One of the reasons married men cheat is because they are not getting enough sex from their wives. Women have lower sex drives than men, on average, and it tends to decrease in married women, particularly after having children. That's why. It doesn't make cheating necessarily okay, it just provides some context.
If we're going to go back to traditionalism, I think in my grandparents' generation, the wives always worked. They just gave their paycheck to their husband.
I was going to ask you your opinion on that, actually, because there's something you said earlier. I was going to ask you your opinion on women that are working to bring to the table as well. Like, what's your opinion on that? Would you say
Well,
that they're not good wives? Would you say they're not traditional?
I'd say the majority are bad wives that work. If I had to do like a balance of
But
probabilities.
some people, you couldn't really
No, I-
generalize and say bad wives, because you've got to remember some people are in a situation where they either have to work in their relationship,
I don't think they're bad wives because they're
or
working.
they may have to be single by no choice and they have to work.
I don't think they're bad wives because they're working. That's not why. I think
Or
that
that-
generation is bad wives because that generation did not teach like submission. If you ask most wives that from like roughly like 35 to like 50, it's like the worst generation of wives just across the board. They don't believe in submission. That's when like divorce started happening. Like if you look at like the 60, 70-year-olds, they might have separated, but they stayed together. I think they're bad wives because the majority put their career before their family.
Historically, women have always worked, and it's likely true that a lot of women who went out to work would let their husbands handle the finances, which makes sense. We need to get rid of this myth of the 1950s housewife. That was a minority of people of a certain class, culture, and time period. Working class women have always worked. Wealthier women were more likely to stay at home. I agree that marriage is probably more stable when the woman prioritizes the marriage over her career. But yes, a lot of women worked historically out of necessity. And also, women who didn't go out to work worked in the home, doing domestic work like cleaning, cooking, taking care of children, taking care of the family, extended family, parents, etc. There has never been a time when women were passive and idle. For 99% of human history, men and women were hunter-gatherers, and in the 1% of time that we haven't been that, we have tailored gender roles to suit the societal rules, cultures, and customs. This is how we have gotten to where we are today.
Women that's gone through domestic violence. There's women that's had to maybe leave their country for so many different. There's so many factors.
The majority of domestic violence isn't real. Like the girls that talk about that, they just kind of throw accusations at men. Most domestic violence is initiated by women. Like,
I mean, what an awful thing to say. That's just awful. While there are, of course, women who do lie and make false accusations, many women do not, and the way Pearl downplays genuine violence against women is disgusting. This is why so many people think that anti-feminism is anti-women because of people like Pearl.
Was it
in the
Duluth
definition.
model?
Yeah, the Duluth
Yeah.
model.
Well, lesbian couples are also the highest perpetrators of domestic violence. And you are absolutely right as well. There's a lot of women who lie about false rape statistics. I mean, we obviously, and what's really sad is it actually negates the women who genuinely are abused, because all of the women who are, false rape statistics, and all of the women who are actually, raped, who do endure abuse, are actually being done a massive disservice by these women who lie. If we look at the Me Too movement, for example, there were a lot of women who lied, who exaggerated, and that is very sad for the genuine, legitimate victims.
But the feminism implies we're equal. And I don't think we're equal. I think men are above women. I think they're better at us at everything. Yes.
Why?
Yeah, because every stat shows they are.
Well, it depends what you mean by men and women are equal, because we're equal in the sense that we deserve respect, but in terms of our strengths, for example, there's been studies that have shown that women are typically better with, say, empathy, because that typically women are usually, because of the way the female brain is wired, we're more suited towards things like cooperation. That's why there's a higher level of women in things like the arts,
but
psychology,
that's why I think that
nursing.
women can only be great under the authority of men. Because when we're on our own, we just don't do well.
Well, we don't want to, be like undermining women. I mean, we can say that women have strengths and men have strengths as well.
No, I'm saying like I can't think of a way that women are their best selves without men. Like I think women
You could say the
need
same
men.
that men also need women.
No, you can have examples of history of men that have been great, did advancements in society, and they avoided women so they could like I think Isaac Newton died a virgin.
I was actually very angry because she kept on making anti-women comments, and I was trying to talk about the female brain structure and how the female brain differs from the male brain. For example, women are better at recognizing emotions and faces, and women are also more group-oriented than men. Women tend to diffuse and avoid conflict. This is why there are more women in certain professions around psychology, social work, teaching, nursing, and childcare. Tim Goldich and David Shackleton have both talked about Lloyd DeMars's theory of human empathy in child rearing and have stated that women, as in mothers, are largely responsible for the evolution of human empathy. If we forget modern feminist women and look at women of the past, such as women in older movies, warmth, care, nurturing, sweetness, these are all classically feminine traits because they are needed to be a good mother. They pair well with being firm and asserting boundaries, so being a kind person but not a pushover because you don't want your child to behave badly or disrespect you. Also, every single person that has ever existed is born of a woman. Nobody would exist if their mother hadn't given birth to them and raised them. All great men historically had a mother. All children are under the authority of their parents, which largely includes their mother, as mothers spend more time with children. That's probably why women are more likely to abuse children. It's likely because they spend more time with them.
So there have been some societies, for example, that were matriarchal, that were matrilineal, in which there was a big presence of the mother and that was passed on by the grandmother.
None that stood the test of time.
Well, not in the West, but for example, like in small tribes, like for example in India, in China. In fact, in China, there's still a tribe. I think it's called the Manosphere tribe. And you have this very kind of female-led tribe. And it's not really feminist because they keep the whole society within the frame of the tribe. So it's not really the same as like a modern Western society.
But they don't advance. That's the whole point. So
it's incredibly ignorant to say that tribal societies don't advance. They're just different to so-called developed nations. It's just a different way of life. There have been many examples of societies that have been matrilineal, not matriarchal necessarily, matrilineal, which is different. Such include the Ashanti tribe in Ghana, the Masuo tribe in China, the Native American Navajo tribe, the Khasi tribe in India, and the Minangkabau tribe of Indonesia. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing.
Men do better work when women are watching. That's been noted in studies. Perform better at sports when there are female spectators. Mm-hmm. Men give more money to charity when there are women. This has been tested. In fact, something like 20% females on a working team increases the performance of the team, but it really increases the performance of the males, right? So you also need women for men to compete amongst themselves, to be selected.
He is correct. Women provide a motivation for men to compete with each other, and even men I have talked to on my podcast discuss this. My view is a gender equalist view that men and women need each other and evolve to cooperate, not compete. That's why I reject feminism. The idea of gender equalism was coined by Tim Goldich, and I think that's a fantastic viewpoint to have going forward regarding harmony and rebuilding relations between the sexes.
I think the point he makes about like women being there as a really good motivator for men is good, but also saying that men are superior to women really negates all of the qualities that women bring. Because I personally think that women should learn to have more responsibility, and I think this is a problem that feminism brings. It doesn't make women have responsibility. It actually undermines women because it turns women into victims. It says that we're victims of the patriarchy rather than teaching women to recognize our innate feminine power. And if we look at the power of women, women do have a level of raw power. It's just a power that's more subtle.
It's not saying that we don't have power. It's not saying that we don't have great qualities. It's just saying I think that men in general are superior. I cannot find one thing that is evidence-based that women are better at than men.
I was going to say beauty pageants, but that was proven wrong recently. Well, apparently men are better at that.
Well, you could argue monetizing beauty, but usually the only way you can monetize beauty is through things that men made. The men run the industries, men run the infrastructure. Like, if women left the workforce tomorrow, men would be okay. Men even raise better children.
There's men perhaps are needed to raise children for certain relationships, but women are certainly better at raising children. And before you interject, I'm not making the argument for single mothers at all. Once you introduce working hours into the working relationship, like men outwork women on average 160 hours a month, and 99% of the gender wage gap can be expressed because of the fact that men simply way outwork women. And then I looked at myself, I'm like, I'm a worker, right? Like, I'm high conscientious, high disagreeable. So I work all the time. And like, I can handle inordinate amounts of stress in my business that like most people think is insane. And then I look at my wife, right? And we got 4 kids and they're 9 and down, 9, 7, I guess 4 and 2. Mm-hmm. And it's insanity at home. And it really only takes me about 20 minutes of a screaming household of kids before I'm like, I'm going outside to sit on the porch and smoke a cigar. I can't put up with this. Mm-hmm. but the patience that my wife exhibits with children, and I understood something, right? There's a natural ability for me to participate and act strong in my war, which is my business, but there's a significant natural inclination for her to be able to put up with children.
That's the point. Men and women have different skills. We are better at different things based on our evolution. Neither sex is superior. Pearl is being an idiot.
Very easy to say. For example, in India, it's rather common, actually, and this is very common in Asian societies as well. In fact, most non-Muslim societies, for the man to defer to his wife. In fact, this is how it always was. And actually, you could turn around and say, well, actually, men need their wives. They need to almost... The fact is that in the home is that the man does what he does to care for his wife. And you could say that is the power of the feminine. That is the man defers to his wife. The man does what he does to love and care for his wife. So this brings it back to the idea that men are not superior to women. Men and women need each other because they're supposed to be complementary.
I think men are superior to women. I think they're because everything like
they can't
because
have children,
but we can't like I'm so tired of hearing women say like because we're a godsend because we have kids. Dogs have kids. Okay, do we worship dogs?
Well, they do in some cultures, yes.
Like what's really more?
Yeah, but a man doesn't go through the 9 months of carrying a baby.
Exactly,
that's a lot.
It is
carrying a child is a lot.
Why would you want to believe that men are superior to women?
You know what? I don't know because I haven't given birth, but from like speaking to my friends. Giving birth is a lot, like labor and everything is crazy. Like,
well, the idea is that we shouldn't really say that men are superior to women because then you end up having
it's not about shouldn't say, but it's not about. It's not even to be mean to women. I say women are the best versions of ourselves under the authority of a man.
You could very easily say men are the best versions of themselves with a woman complimenting them.
No, I don't think it's the same because
that's going to make you come across as misogynist.
Okay, I'm noticing that women, like daughters, are just better for caring for the elderly.
Well, then, why are they more likely to kill them?
Which one?
Women are more likely to kill the elderly and the infants.
To work with them.
Well, probably they have to spend a lot of time with them.
So if they're more likely to be working around them, that's why.
Elderly are kind of annoying.
If they're more around them, then that would mean why,
Like there's even studies that show women are less empathetic than men. Like this whole idea, it's just feminism. It's not like
feminism
it's
because
not
actually
true.
it's based on looking at women and men's different neurological structures.
Women are more empathetic because they're more agreeable, and empathy and agreeability are like women are in general. I'm not saying there's like outliers. I'm not saying that's good or bad.
I'm saying they're not towards men. Men are more empathetic towards men than women are towards men.
Yes, because feminism has actually really reduced the level of empathy that a lot of women have towards men. And a lot of the kind, caring gentleness that women used to have is almost being sucked out of women as a result of feminism.
Studies consistently show that women score higher on self-reported empathy than men. Whether or not women are actually more empathetic is debatable, as there are some studies that say we are, while other studies say that it's mixed. But women are definitely better at recognizing emotion, both in themselves and in others. This is why women are less likely to be diagnosed with autism than men, and why autistic women tend to be better at masking. I don't know why Pearl is saying that this is feminism, when feminists generally argue that gender is a social construct and that the female brain doesn't really exist. A feminist generally doesn't base their views of males and females on science and regards any neurological differences as a form of sexism.
Say that women are actually superior to men because without a woman, a man has no purpose in life because a lot of what men do is to earn the love, care, and respect of women. A lot of men doing their working. You were talking earlier about men becoming millionaires. Why do men feel the drive to become millionaires? You know what I mean?
Obviously, yes, you're right. Everything a man does ultimately is to obtain like the love and respect of women. That's literally what motivates us biologically to acquire resources. Yes. But that doesn't actually challenge anything Pearl said.
Well, it does, because effectively I'm making the argument that you could say that women are more superior to men in the sense that if it wasn't for women, men would have no purpose, and that level of drive that gives the man's life a purpose is to have a woman.
I don't agree with that. I think there are men that have written, like, I wish I could remember this guy's name, but he did a shit ton of inventions.
Tesla.
Oh, and
you're thinking of Tesla, probably.
No, I'm not. This was like 100 years ago, and then there was one that was like
saying saying that men do things to earn the love, respect, and attention of
Not
women.
of a woman, though. You said a woman.
Well, yes, actually, a woman. Because, for example, a
No.
lot of men were like, well, Sigmund Freud was, he was, okay, whatever he was, but he was largely, a lot of men would be, very obsessed with obtaining the love of one woman. Heck, look at the story of the Great Gatsby. I mean, Jay Gatsby, he puts on all of these parties. He does it all for a woman, a very selfish, spoiled woman.
I was trying to make a serious point. Sigmund Freud was obviously a nut job, but he loved his wife. And a lot of men consider their wife to be the most important thing in their life. I have heard the argument that men do what they do primarily for women countless times. There is a man from India who invented a machine that produces hygienic sanitary pads for women to use when menstruating. He invented this because his wife was using old newspapers and dirty rags. Stephen King has often remarked on the importance of his marriage in sustaining his life and his career. Of course, many marriages are unhappy, and many marriages are also happy. Pearl is as bad as a feminist. She is driving a wedge between male and female relations, which is exactly what I hate about feminism. It's horrible. This is an awful narrative to sell to people.
What you call propaganda. You're not a man.
That is propaganda, yeah.
Men do
That
things
is
for
propaganda,
women.
yeah.
We don't do things just because we're looking for one perfect woman.
Yeah.
It's society that's conditioned us to have to stick to one woman.
That doesn't sound very romantic.
Well, it's not romantic because biology is not romantic. And it doesn't mean that it's not it doesn't mean that it's not an admirable goal to shoot for. Like I actually, King, I totally agree with you, right? Like you build yourself into a powerful man that you have options to choose from. And then you make the decision to commit to a woman, and this is where again I'm going to lose some people. That you should have as many chicks as possible.
No, you're right.
No, you should become dangerous to be able to have as many chicks as possible, so that your girl damn respects you and doesn't cheat on you. Because once she knows you have no other options, she's damn leaving, right? But there's still something admirable and respectful to remove yourself from that marketplace once you have a woman that bears children for you, because it keeps society civil, right? Mm-hmm. Societies where you have a man with many wives, they have a tendency, and actually a very predictable tendency, to devolve into civil war.
Sorry, quick question, Paul. Where are you getting these stats from? So I'm not sure you're getting these stats about 1 in 3 women having STDs, 1 in 3 women having abortions. I mean, it's a very minority of people who actually have.
I said have had.
Well, it's a very short, but it's actually a minority of people. If you actually
I got that from the CDC.
Pearl often brings up certain statistics about STDs, abortion, etc. And I decided to check the stats on STDs shortly after I was on Pearl's show. I was on Pearl's show in 2023, so the stats I found were from the previous year. The UK Health Security Agency reported 392,453 STD diagnoses in 2022. In the United States, the CDC reported around 2.5 million diagnosed cases of chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis in 2021. When compared with the overall populations of the UK and US, these annual diagnosis figures amount to well under 1% of the population in a single year. However, it's important to understand what these numbers actually represent. They are diagnoses, not necessarily unique individuals. One person can receive multiple diagnoses, and many infections go undetected because some people never get tested. So diagnosis figures alone cannot tell us exactly what percentage of the population currently has an STD. What we can say is that the vast majority of people are not diagnosed with chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, or HIV in any given year. The idea that these infections are affecting most people is simply not supported by the data. At the same time, some sexually transmitted infections are much more widespread than others. Herpes, for example, is estimated by the World Health Organization to affect hundreds of millions of people worldwide, often without symptoms. HPV is also extremely common. It would therefore be misleading to treat all STDs as though they have similar prevalence rates. My broader point is that discussions around sexual health often become distorted by sensational statistics. It is important to distinguish between annual diagnoses, lifetime infection rates, estimated prevalence, and specific diseases because they are not all measuring the same thing. The reality is more nuanced than either side often presents. Some STDs are common, some are relatively uncommon, many are treatable, and prevalence varies enormously depending on the infection being discussed. People should take sexual health seriously. But we should also be careful not to create the impression that virtually everyone or even most people are infected, because the evidence does not support that conclusion.
The problem as well is a lot of data uses sensationalism, because usually when you look at these stats, they'll use sensationalism, but it's actually a small minority of people who will actually do these kind of things. You know, it's not like everybody has this. I mean, they have said actually that apparently some like 80% of people have at least one STD, but it's like a non-dangerous one effectively.
Wow, I think the men are like, wow, I'm so happy that it's a non-dangerous STD.
Well, men and women,
it's
effectively.
Sensationalism.
But also, what's the stat on the amount of men that have an STD?
The amount of men that have an STD? Well, 1 out of 3 men are virgins.
By what age?
Under 30.
No, 1 in 3 men under 30 are not virgins. The figure comes from the General Social Survey, showing that around 28% of men under 30 reported having had no sex during the previous year. No sex in the past year is not the same thing as being a virgin. A man could have had previous relationships, previous sexual partners, or simply gone through a period of not dating. Over time, this statistic has been exaggerated and distorted into the claim that 1 in 3 young men have never had sex, which is not what the data shows. And even then, it's still not the majority. It's a large number, but it's not most people. People don't check data and information. This stuff is designed to spread sensationalism and mess with you.
How does it help people to see these stats as well? Because actually it's almost like selling this image of like, it's like if you look at the news, it's all the shock value. You know what I mean? Like, how does it actually help people?
No, because it's honest. It creates a real picture. And I think you just say it, like, women just don't like the numbers when they make us look bad.
It is not honest. Read a book. Read The Female Brain. This will teach you all about the female brain. Books can teach you way more than the internet.
And we could also say there's more women now who are more well-educated, for example.
Men don't care. And honestly, the education makes us stupid.
I don't think education is anything, though. Like, I think education is just literally a way to suck us in.
Am I surprised that these people are saying that education makes you stupid?
You know, in Europe, a lot of the leading female politicians right now are women. Like, you have Marine Le Pen in France. You've got the lady in, I think, Serbia. You've got, what's her face, Meloni in Italy.
Do you think Europe's going in a good direction?
Actually,
it's doing much better than UK, because they're starting to move away from all of this,
How long was your female prime minister in power for here? Like 4 days?
Well, Margaret Thatcher was
but you're going back 2 generations, and I love Margaret Thatcher. That whole generation of women was an entirely different generation of female leaders, right? These were conservative, like union busting, Margaret Thatcher, Golda Meir, those kind of women were a different breed, right? Like, your prime minister came in and she was, we're going to go to China and enter the pig markets. And, and 4 days later, like, get out, right?
But I wasn't talking about her. I was talking about the other European politicians.
Yeah, but like, look at the Finnish Sanna Marin was just kicked out, and everybody was like, how misogynistic to kick her out. It's like, really? She was number 3 in the election, and number 2 was another woman that beat her.
If you look at the state of France now with this, what's just happened recently in Paris, Marine Le Pen was going and speaking out against that. And not just her, but there's a lot of, as I mentioned, Meloni and Italy.
All of these far left women vote. Women vote.
They're all conservative libertarian
women vote for these far left policies.
Yeah, Giorgia Meloni and Marine Le Pen are far left.
The politicians are appeasing the women. I don't know how, but like women always go to the individual when I'm talking about the collective. I'm talking about the group. Women vote. In the U.S., we would have won every election. Conservatives would have won every election the last 100 years had women not voted.
I mean, why is that even a good thing? Not everyone wants a conservative government. Plenty of men are left-leaning, and plenty of women are right-leaning. The British left was male-dominated. They're the ones who brought in trade unions and the welfare state, which has saved millions of lives. Unlike in the US, where you literally have to pay for an ambulance. By the way, I brought up Giorgia Meloni and Marine Le Pen contextually, not because I necessarily support them. I'm not actually right-wing.
Women are more likely to wage war.
And it makes sense why, right? Because conservatives, by definition, are those that conserve the existing institutions, and who build the existing institutions.
Well, what about the fact that, for example, if you look at historically, a lot of the wars were started by men. For example, things like the Crusades or World War I and World War II, that was all men.
So
women are still more likely to wage war when they're in power.
Well, what's an example of women waging war?
Women have always
I can't think of any.
Hey, I'll give you one. Catherine the Great captures Crimea on behalf of Russia, and we seem to be having a border conflict in Crimea today.
But then I could just as easily say, well, World War I and World War II were caused by men.
But
in fact, the entire casualties...
It's a per capita argument. Obviously, it's not an absolute, let's add it all together. Obviously, over the course of history, there have been more wars as an absolute started by men. But what Pearl is saying is that female leaders, as an outcome of their leadership, there's a statistical significance to more likely having a war when women are in the lead. It's just, there's been less females. Obviously, there's been less wars started by females, of course.
It's actually true that female leaders have started more wars than male leaders, in the same way that it's true that lesbians are more likely to commit domestic violence. I actually didn't know this at the time, that female leaders are more likely to wage war. Obviously, there have been way more male leaders than female leaders, and there are more heterosexual men than lesbian women. So it's disproportionate, which is interesting.
The problem is when women try to bring peace, we naturally go to more egalitarianism as opposed to hierarchy. Men naturally put themselves in a hierarchy where women, it's like why I did a show on sluts the other day. I was like, what's a hoe? What's a slut? What's a whore? And women will naturally be like, well, we can't label them. We can't, nobody's that. Where men, it's like, okay, sex, attention, money, go. And it's like they naturally just do a hierarchy.
So why is that better than egalitarianism?
Because the problem is egalitarianism doesn't work in society. That's why we have this like everyone is special. That's where you get a lot of the left policies. They come from egalitarianism. We are all equal.
I think you're confusing Marxism with classical liberalism.
No,
because classical liberalism has got nothing to do with this left. No,
I'm saying like so. For example, let's be fair and equal. Let's let the men into the women's bathrooms. That's an example of how women want things to be more fair, equal.
That's a very extreme example. That's a cultural Marxist.
But that's my point. Is women tend to vote more left when it comes to cultural.
Aren't radical feminists the ones who are against transgender ideology?
Well, again, it depends on what you mean by egalitarian. For example, like if we look at, say, the principles of classical liberalism, which is not liberalism is really an English idea. It's that, for example, everybody should be treated as equal under the law. And what that means is that men and women should both receive an equal amount of respect. And the problem is that the feminist idea has got nothing to do with liberalism. It's rooted in Marxism. It's rooted in this idea of that, we should have, as you said earlier, the destruction of family, the destruction of society. It's this idea of women are an oppressed social class. And I do agree with you that a lot of the problems that have come to women come from feminism, but I do think you're conflating feminism with liberalism.
But it's also saying feminists also promote that we are equal, which goes back to egalitarianism.
Well, you could say feminists are promoting female supremacy, not equality.
True, that's true, but that's how they promote it, right? They say we are equal, but we are not equal to men. Which, again, it goes back to egalitarianism, fairness. So when women are in politics, we tend to vote for those policies.
She really doesn't know what she is talking about. She keeps conflating terminology. Egalitarianism is anti-feminism because egalitarianism believes that men and women deserve equal rights. It's a classical liberal principle. That's why a lot of people label themselves as egalitarians, not feminists. I don't think she understands feminism at all. Feminism says that women are oppressed because they are not on equal footing with men. I'm saying that men and women are different in nature, but equal in value. That's what most anti-feminists I have spoken to and read over the last decade have argued. Feminism wants to restructure society. Radical feminism wants to do this through overthrowing the patriarchy. Liberal feminism wants to achieve this through legal reforms, many of which harm men and women in the process. Liberalism, as in classical liberalism, just wants to give everyone equal human rights. It doesn't want to prioritize one sex over the other.
You know damn well it is not men that are pushing the trans stuff in the bathrooms. And I can tell you this, being an athlete, playing with this stuff, the men think this shit is stupid.
Well, the women are the ones. I mean, Posey Parker, J.K. Rowling.
I'm telling you, they
don't.
Not across the board. But you keep talking about individuals. I'm talking about the group. You're naming people I don't know. I'm not from Britain, so I don't even know who you're talking about.
So Pearl has never heard of J.K. Rowling. Okay.
Feminist is putting a career before family. Traditional women put family first.
The actual definition of feminist is about liberating.
You cannot change the definition because you feel like it.
Well, no, the actual definition of feminism is a social ideology.
We have enough.
So what we have learned today is that Pearl Davis is a feminist because apparently any non-traditional woman who prioritizes career over family is a feminist. That includes Pearl, Ayn Rand, Margaret Thatcher, me. We're all feminists really deep down. So as you can tell, this was all quite ridiculous. I was incredibly fed up by the end. I don't like talking to stupid people, especially about something I know a lot about, which they clearly refuse to listen to. I heavily edited the original video, which was 2.5 hours long. Stay tuned for part 2, where I appeared on her show for the second time. It was a bundle of laughs. Do let me know your thoughts on this below. For regular essays critiquing feminism, follow my Rational Female Substack. Link is available here or in the description below. To support the channel further, consider buying me a coffee via this link. Your support really helps me out a lot.